Yeah, we know 65-7 looked really, really bad for the conference, but let's not forget the rest of the season. Let's not forget the accomplishments, starting with TCU and on down the line. And we will explore the Big 12 right here at the Voice of College Football for the next couple hours with some of the best content creators and analysts from the Big 12. So jump on in here. We will get to your comments, your questions, and possibly some calls from you. But we're cycling in a lot of content creators, and we got Golden Blue Dude kicking us off. Good to see you, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, man. How many live shows have you done today so far? Because I know I was a part of one earlier, and I know you did one right before this. Have you done like six or seven? How many have you done?
Yeah, so we did Ohio State at 11 a.m. You and I had a conversation with West Virginia AD Ren Baker, so folks be looking out for that, whether that be on Golden Blue Dude's channel or we're going to post that on the West Virginia channel. So we did that. Then I had a Michigan live stream at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. Now we're back here at 8.
Man, and you have one after this.
No, 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 no. This is just all Big 12 for a couple hours. And then, yeah, I'm
Gotcha.
shutting down for the night. That's for sure.
I
We
got
usually
you.
do Oklahoma on Wednesday. That's going to be this Friday. So
Okay.
I'm going to ease off the gas here for the next few days, at least based on what I'm used to doing. But let's dive in on the Big 12. You know, before we grill you on West Virginia, when you look at this conference, this is what I was saying about the Big 12 going into the season. And it pretty much proved to be true that I don't know if this conference has an elite program, an elite team. We could argue about TCU. Did the last game show us that they weren't quite up to it? Yeah, but they had a special season otherwise. But then you filter through this conference, and when you land at Iowa State as being the worst team in the conference, and they go out and they beat Iowa out of the Big Ten, and they play pretty well against just about everyone. It was a deep conference, and the Kansas story was fun to watch. I know you didn't like the overtime
Yeah,
loss by
we
two
kicked it off.
touchdowns. You know who loses by two scores in overtime? That never happens.
That
But
only happens in West Virginia.
West Virginia figured out a way to do that.
Yeah.
But the Kansas story was fun, and they almost beat Arkansas. They played one of the great bowl games of the bowl season, 55-53. So there were some really good stories in there. I like what Joey McGuire did at Texas Tech. They had a nice season. They knocked off Ole Miss from the SEC easily in the Texas Bowl. And, of course, TCU knocking off Michigan. And to cap off what they were able to do, Kansas State was a nice team to watch throughout the season. You know, where are you on the Big 12?
I agree with you 100%. They're deep, but at the same time, they don't have a standout elite team like the SEC has Alabama and Georgia right now. Georgia's the real dominating team. The Big Ten has Michigan and Ohio State. Pac-12 has Utah and USC. And the ACC has Clemson. I think Florida State's going to make some big-time noise in 2023. But for the Big 12, it's whoever survives, basically. I mean, you even look at TCU, and honestly, if you're a TCU fan watching this, you're not going to like me right now. You're not going to like me. TCU did not belong in the playoffs. Let me explain. The reason TCU did not deserve, well, I don't think they were one of the four best teams. They earned their way in. So deserve is the wrong word. They did deserve to be in, but they were not one of the four best teams. You look at what happened during the regular season, a lot of comeback wins, a lot of just they got the bounce of the ball this year. You look at their defense, not very good. I mean, they finished 91st in points allowed per game. That's not good. Great offense, tough schedule, they were battle tested, and I think that's what hurt Michigan. I've been racking my brain ever since the playoffs and national championship happened. I've been racking my brain because first Michigan goes on the road and absolutely destroys Ohio State, right? And then Michigan loses to TCU, but Ohio State only loses to Georgia by one, and then TCU gets obliterated by Georgia. I'm like, what? What happened? I think what happened was TCU was battle tested. They were used to having to, battle from behind, beat teams that they probably shouldn't have beat, and they were ready for that. Michigan's schedule, I think, set them up for a fall in the first round of the playoffs because if you compare schedules, TCU was like fourth and Michigan's was 48th. So TCU was certainly more battle tested, but I think Michigan was still the better team. But those two pick sixes, I'm telling you, the bounce of the ball was in favor of TCU. And I'll get into this more, but I think TCU is in for a major step back this year.
Well, I think it's fair to say, and I'm going to follow pretty much in line with where you're headed on all this. You can give credit to a team and still say they really weren't good enough the way
Yep.
we evaluate. But hey, they pulled it off, and that's what TCU did. TCU was one of the 8 or 10 best teams in the country.
Yes,
They weren't
I
the
would agree
third or
with that.
fourth best team in the country. I would not have wanted to see them play Alabama or Tennessee or some
Mhm.
other teams out there.
I
But
think
they
TCU and Clemson would have been a good game, though.
TCU Clemson would be a good game. It'd be a real interesting game now that they lost their offensive coordinator to Clemson. But
Yep.
they were just a team that I think if you watch as much football as we do, you can tell, okay, this team isn't quite that good. But hey, they're making it happen every week. They're finding a way. Some of it was them making a way. Some of it was some bounces of the ball, some injuries falling in their way.
Well, I mean, look at the first meeting between them and Kansas State. Kansas State was basically controlling that game, dominating TCU. And
Absolutely.
boom, their first string quarterback goes down, and then their second string quarterback goes down, and they're down to their third string, and then TCU mounts a comeback. So, yes.
Yeah, and shoot, just look at the West Virginia game. And now every top team has some struggles against some mediocre teams, but TCU was doing that against everybody. They go to West Virginia. That game was a 3-point game with just a few seconds left in the game. That was a struggle for them. So they made it happen. They had a magical season, but the clock struck midnight, and when it struck midnight,
It was loud.
I think a lot of us thought it might strike midnight by like 20 points or 3
Yeah.
touchdowns, but
Mm.
one of the worst defeats in the history of football. Just that was
Yeah.
what I think we saw with Ohio State was Georgia's the best team. That's all there is to it. They are the best. But when Ohio State could pull it together, they had the talent to match them on a good night. And that's what they did. They had a good night. They pulled it all together. They had the passing game to give Georgia problems. And I didn't know what to expect going into that game, but what we got was an epic classic game, and it was great
Yeah.
to see. We go from just 2 unbelievable semifinal games, and then we get this national championship game that was just,
Well,
you and
I
I
think
kind of
Ohio
like.
State exposed Georgia's secondary is what happened. And that Georgia team that we saw against Ohio State didn't look like the majority. I mean, there was the Georgia Missouri game. They didn't look good in that game. Georgia Kent State didn't look good in that game. But for the most part, they looked pretty good in the regular season and the SEC championship. So I think another part of it is maybe Georgia was playing their A- or B+ game as well, and Ohio State came to play them. They went all out, and had they made that field goal, Georgia would not be talking about back-to-back national championships. You got to play your A++ game every game.
I'll steer us back onto the Big 12, and you're a guy that on a regular basis is trying to figure out what are the next moves made by these conferences. What could it be? What could it look like? And what we know is that we got 4 really interesting programs joining the Big 12. I don't know that they're going to get us to where what we were talking about a few minutes ago with the Big 12 being able to match at the top of the conference. I don't think these 4 programs are going to do that, but they're basically just more Texas Tech and Oklahoma States. And it's
And West
just going to,
Virginia's.
it's going to be
Yeah.
fun to see who the margins are going to be razor close between these programs. So who's going to do a better job at recruiting? Who's going to build the better facilities? Who's going to have the better coaching and development that's going to give a BYU the edge, or a Cincinnati the edge, or a West Virginia the edge, or whoever's going to emerge out of this in the next 5 years as the better teams near the top?
Yeah, and I also think that it's going to help West Virginia in scheduling because the Big 12 isn't going to be a round robin anymore. So some years, you're going to have to play the best teams, and then some years you're not going to have to play the best teams. And then, of course, it depends on the road slate. And then we have Cincinnati. I'm hoping we at least get to play Cincinnati every year, whether it's home or road. We need to play Cincinnati every year. That would help us out a lot. And I'm not sure about UCF because they're in Florida, so it's about the same. But I definitely think that it'll help with our scheduling, and it's not going to be as brutal as what it's been. Now, a road trip to BYU, that's not going to be fun, but we're not going to be doing that every year. Probably not even every other year. We're probably talking about once every 4 years as far as road trip to BYU. So I like how it's going to affect our scheduling. I think it's going to help us.
Do you have a thought on, and maybe they have announced this and I just missed it, or with all the information I take in every day, I probably forgot it, but the way the Big 12 is going to be set up in regards to the formats of the divisions, if there are going to be divisions, and the scheduling and how they're going to work all that out, especially with Oklahoma and Texas still around
Yeah.
for probably a year, maybe two.
The only thing that I know is number one, no divisions. They're sticking with that, to my knowledge, best of my ability. Um, and number two, the way they're scheduling and setting it up, they are planning for Texas and Oklahoma to be around for 2 years. And the plan is everybody is going to play them at least one time. Now, Oklahoma State will play them both years, or will play Oklahoma both years because that's a rivalry and they want to keep that going as long as possible. But all the other teams will play Oklahoma and Texas at least once. Now, you're not guaranteed a home game with Texas and a home game with Oklahoma, but let's say you get to play Oklahoma at home in 2023. Well, that means the next year you'll play Texas on the road in 2024. But that's as far as I know.
I would think they wouldn't want to do anything permanent with these divisions until Oklahoma and Texas are gone. They don't want to restructure it this fall and then have to restructure it in a year or two and tear it all up again, unless they can come up with some kind of a format where they just lose Texas off one division, Oklahoma off the other, and that's what it's
I
going to
think
look like
everybody's
going
heading
forward.
towards no divisions, anyways.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 did away with it. The ACC is doing away with it in 2023. The Big Ten has announced that they haven't said a definite year, but they're probably. And then the SEC has announced that they're thinking about it too. So I think eventually, and yes, that makes the most sense. We're having, the best team play against the fourth and fifth best team in these conference championships because these divisions get lopsided because you can't think 10 years ahead and these divisions are going to be perfectly even. No, it's not. One's going to be better this year and it can go back and forth, but you're going to get mismatches in the conference championship. So I think that's the right call. I think all of the conferences need to do away with divisions. I think it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why they even came up with that rule. If you have 12 members, in order to have a conference championship, you have to have two divisions. What was do you know, what was the rationale behind that?
I think it's basically just modeling the NFL and thinking this is the way you set up, larger conferences. You have to have divisions. Look at baseball, look at basketball. Like every sport's got divisions, so you have to have divisions or you can't do it. And then you just have the two division winners play. And, that works in those other sports because of a lot of different reasons that we don't need to get into, but it just works. And we see it in the Big Ten every year. We see it all over the place where exactly what you're talking about. People want to see the two best teams in the conference, and they're looking at the best team taking out the fourth best team. And it's just, and the other issue with it that gets corrected by them abolishing the divisions is, if you're going to have a division, everybody's got to play everyone in the division to figure out who the best team is. Therefore, you only play two teams in the other division and there's 7 other teams. So there are 5 teams that rotate, or 6 teams. So you're not seeing a team for 6 or 7 years. You can get away from all that. The way that the ACC setting it up, which makes total sense to me, you got 3 designated rivals. You split the rest of the conference down the middle, and you just alternate who you play each year. You play this group this year, play the next. So you never go more than one season without seeing everybody in the conference. So makes total
So
sense.
much sense to me. I agree with that.
We got
Last year, whenever I did my preseason predictions, going back to Big 12 real quick, whenever I did my preseason predictions, I was pretty close on most things. I hit the nail on the head with Kansas State, but the 2 teams that I messed up the most, number one, TCU, thought they were going to have an identity crisis because Gary Patterson was TCU, and they had a bad season in 2021. I missed that tremendously. But like we talked about earlier, they just kept winning football games that really they shouldn't have won. They kept having to come back. And the runoff field goal against Baylor, that wasn't a walk-off field goal. That was a runoff. They almost didn't get that thing off. And then the other team, of course, I already know, my team, West Virginia, I thought we made some good moves in the offseason for the offense, which we did. Graham Harrell, I still think is a good offensive coordinator, and I still think that JT Daniels is a good quarterback. I just think Neil Brown couldn't keep his hands out of offense, and, both Graham Harrell and JT are gone from West Virginia. But all the other teams pretty much nailed it. The only other team that I was slightly off on, and it was just because I didn't know much about them, was Texas Tech. Texas Tech did surprise me.
All right, folks, we're talking Big 12. We got GBD here. We're also being joined by Clint Foster. We appreciate Clint stopping by to break down the Big 12 for us. Clint, what's going on tonight?
Oh, great. I got TCU West Virginia on TV actually right now. So,
oh, yeah, basketball.
Yeah,
you didn't hear what I said earlier, right? I said something that was going to make TCU fans mad.
What's that?
Well, what I said was,
I don't think you can do anything that's going to make me more upset than the news I got today about TCU. But go ahead, GBD.
We'll get to that in a second. Well, I do think that TCU earned their way into the playoffs, but it is my opinion, doesn't mean it's facts, but it's my opinion that I don't think that TCU was one of the 4 best teams as far as the playoffs go. And hold on. The reason why I said that is if you look at the entire schedule, and me and Mark talked about this earlier, pretty much all the games they struggled. Did they win? Yes, but they struggled in basically every game. They had to come back in multiple games. Even the West Virginia game, they were only up by 3 points with 20 seconds left before that touchdown sealed the game. So that first round of the playoffs, I told Mark I was trying to rack my brain on why TCU beat Michigan but got blown out by Georgia, because I thought Georgia and Michigan were very, very similar. And I came to the conclusion that TCU was battle tested, even though I thought Michigan was the better team. Still do, by the way. I still think Michigan was the better team. But Michigan's soft schedule set them up for failure in the playoffs. TCU was used to that moment, used to the battle tested. But then when they got to the national championship, depth is what got TCU. TCU got to recover between the Big 12 championship and the first round of the playoffs, so depth wasn't as important. But the gap between the first round of the playoffs and the national championship, not as wide. So I think depth is what killed them against Georgia, and Georgia made them tap early in that game.
Yeah, I don't think you're totally wrong there, honestly. I mean, I do feel like, we did earn our spot. I think that when you look at resume, that we were one of the 4 best teams in the country. I wouldn't have put anybody else in above us, and we did benefit. There's no doubt. There was a magical season. We benefited from a lot of luck, but luck is when hard work meets opportunity, right, baby? Sometimes you got to have a little bit of benefit out of that if you're going to be successful in college football. But yeah, the way that national championship went, to me, Georgia is unquestionably the best team in the country. There was clearly a talent differential. I was, as a lot of TCU fans were, very shocked by the just complete ineptness that we showed after, for the last 3 quarters of that game. And I don't know, how much of that was Garrett Riley wasn't totally focused on the game because he was already talking to Clemson. I don't know how much of it was, obviously we missed Kendry Miller, but we just got dominated up front on particularly the offensive line. And, is what it is. Hopefully we get a chance to go back one of these days. But
that's why I mentioned depth, because people don't realize Georgia's second string on that D line could start anywhere in the nation. So depth really is what killed TCU in the national championship. Georgia was rotating in and out 5-star, like a 5-star replaced a 5-star. Yeah. As far as being on the field, so they were always. Look at their running back situation. 3 beasts. They can pretty much wear down anybody. So it was a little bit of a mismatch up front, and then depth played a big issue in that game for TCU.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah, it's 100% true that you're right. We've never been a team ever that has recruited multiple 5-stars, if any 5-stars at all, much less having 5-stars too deep on your bench. So yeah, that was always going to be an issue for sure. But,
Exactly.
wish we could have had a better showing. But I said it on my video, and I'll say it a million times. I've been through way worse as a TCU fan than losing the national championship, I mean, still a pretty dang good year.
1-5-7 is worse. I wanted to ask you something, kind of catch you off guard a little bit. So, how do you feel about TCU going into 2023? Let me set it up for you, all right? So, your defense was not very good in 2022. It was 91st in points allowed. Now, was it good at creating turnovers and being aggressive? Yes. But as far as allowing points, not good. And you're losing a lot from the offenses, which was basically what carried you. Do you think, number one, TCU will take a step back? Number two, if you do, how big of a step back do you think TCU will take?
Well, I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that we'll take a step back from a national championship appearance. I think that's about one of the easiest bets that you can make. We have lost a lot of talent. I am not personally 100% sold on Chandler Morris, so we'll see. I feel like he's had one really great game.
Yeah.
He's had one really great game, and other than that, he has not impressed me. Really, as a starting quarterback outside of that Baylor game in 2021. And we have got some really interesting transfers coming in. I think JoJo Earl can contribute immediately from Alabama. I think Trey Sanders from Alabama can contribute immediately. I think Tommy Brockemeyer can contribute immediately from Alabama. His dad's actually a friend of mine. It's very funny that he's on the TCU roster since his dad is a Texas guy who has always hated TCU. But yeah, I feel like if things break our way, I feel like we could potentially sneak in as that second place team in the Big 12 championship, potentially if things really go right. But next year is going to be one where I'm just going to be happy with making a bowl game and, kind of beginning to not 100% rebuild, but rebuild from where we were. We had the benefit of a lot of experienced talent on our team that hadn't been being used properly for a long time. And, you don't just turn around and replace that unless you are an Alabama or a Georgia or an Ohio State,
Right. And on top of that, the scheduling, usually you don't know the dates of who you're going to play, but you look at last year's schedule and you just flip it. Oh, we had home with them last year, so we'll have them on the road this year and vice versa. Now with adding, BYU, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati, all of us Big 12 fans, we're sitting on pins and needles to see if we got screwed or if it's going to be favorable for us. So that's going to be a completely different element from year to year. Yeah. Usually we basically know what the schedule is going to look like as far as who we're going to play and where. It's just a win. Now that's out the window. Now we're going to be waiting year to year to see who we play.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what the schedule looks like because you're totally right, GBD. It's like, who the heck knows? I mean, you're not going to play everybody in the conference, right? But how is that? Is it going to be divisions? Is it going to be pods? Are you going to be having a really, really rough road schedule? For the past several years, we always played both the Oklahoma teams on the road every other year. That was never very fun for us. So
like I was telling GBD before, I don't think that the Big 12 is going to do anything to where once Oklahoma and Texas leave, they're going to have to tear it all up again. They don't want to do something for one season or two seasons, and then they got to tear it all up again. I think they're only going to do something if they can say, okay, they're even in such a way, maybe two divisions, and when Texas leaves, they leave that division. Oklahoma leaves that division. We can keep the same structure, and we don't have to tear this all up again. Let me ask you this, Clint, because GBD focused on asking about TCU for 2023. I'm going to ask for even longer term because of what we saw this year. And because TCU is located in Dallas, it's almost
hey now, Fort Worth. Okay,
sorry, Dallas. Fort Worth. It's more Fort Worth than Dallas.
No, yeah, Fort
got to
Worth
give
people...
them equal time. Got to give them equal time. My bad. So Dallas, Fort Worth. TCU is located in Dallas, Fort Worth. I liken it to Atlanta, Houston in terms of just being an NFL factory of high schools. In Dallas. So there's potential to, and from what I understand from some of my TCU sources, a lot of good things going on in regards to facilities, a lot of money coming into the program because of the success. Sonny Dykes is, I don't want to call him a wild card. That wouldn't be correct, but you got to go way back to find a coach who basically had never proven anything, at least in the Power 5 ranks. And then suddenly, boom, it's onto a national championship game, like maybe Gene Chizik at Auburn. So, do you think this is sustainable? Maybe not making national title appearances every other year, but sustainable as a top 10 or 15 program in the country long term?
Here's the thing. Me and a lot of other TCU fans that I run around with and have talked to for a long time have said there's no reason we can't be a Miami type team. There's a lot of similarities just as structurally and geographically between TCU and Miami. They're both small private schools. They're both in super, super fertile recruiting areas. And, outside of before Miami just became an overnight sensation, there wasn't a whole big giant history of success, and we've said for a long time, if we can build a fence around DFW, if we can make that kind of like if you've seen the 30 for 30 of the U, the state of Miami, where, hey, nobody who we want to come to our school leaves this area, they come to us. There's no reason why we can't be one of those blue chip, pretty consistently very successful programs. I mean, we were a very successful program. We have been under Gary Patterson. We were for 20 years, the last 4 notwithstanding. So yeah, I mean, next year, no, we're not gonna, I don't think, set the world on fire next year, but I think absolutely there's no reason why we shouldn't expect to be competitive with the amount of money that the school does have available to it, with the recruits that are in the immediate area. And yeah, with the success and now the foundation that Sonny Dykes has built just in year number 1. Now, hopefully this new OC doesn't completely burn all that to the ground. I think this is really, it's really hurt a lot of TCU fans, myself included, just because I don't really like the message that it sends, to women, basically across the nation. But, hoping for the best, I suppose.
So, Clint, now that the national championship is in the books and the entire college football season, what can we expect to see on your YouTube channel?
Well, a lot more Big 12 themed stuff. So, rejoice, GBD. I'm actually working on a sketch right now. I'm writing one that's going to be very Texas focused. It's going to be like Southwest Conference themed. So the Texas schools in Arkansas. But yeah, the off season is a good time for me to catch up on other representation, other teams, because I typically, I've had people in the past ask me like, "Oh, you should do TCU fans for basketball or baseball." I'm like, bro, that is too many games. That is a lot. It's a lot of work.
To do a preview and then post game after every bet. It's not like one game a week. There's like 2 or 3 games a week. It's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, maybe not, but I'll be doing a lot more Big 12 content for sure.
So I'm going to ask both of you this question, as we're in this interesting place we've kind of been talking about, where Oklahoma and Texas are still hanging around, but then you bring on the 4 new schools, and I think that's totally cool. I love that. I didn't want the clean break. I didn't want OU and Texas to leave at the same time that the other 4 joined and have it be a clean break. I wanted the awkwardness of Oklahoma and Texas still being around, and the new 4 have to play them, because hey, if nothing else, just to catch a good football game on a Saturday afternoon. When is Oklahoma going to schedule UCF, or when is Texas going to schedule Cincinnati, or whatever kind of matchups we get out of those 4 versus those 2, we should take advantage of and embrace those. But I just love the awkwardness of, conference, mates being together that don't want to be together for a year or 2.
Yeah. Y'all are still here.
Exactly. And like you guys were talking about, what's the Big 12 going to do with that? How much are they going to pit those teams against each other? So
it's like dancing with somebody you broke up with at the prom.
Exactly. You got to make it look good for the night, to put a smile on your face. Exactly. So how much, as West Virginia and TCU guys, are you hoping Texas and Oklahoma get beat down? Before you answer that, let me throw this caveat into it. This is the other thing I find interesting in these type situations. Oklahoma and Texas are going to go into the SEC. So there's, that traditional SEC people will want to beat them down for years just to kind of prove you don't really belong here. So you got to earn it, kind of thing. And so it's going to be fun for someone like myself just to read the okay, is Oklahoma and Texas, are they gonna play better than we expect and actually, earn some respect in the SEC, or are they gonna get beaten down and we can kind of laugh at Texas? Oh, you're going 5-7 in the SEC kind of thing. And the same thing here. Do Oklahoma and Texas, you've already made it through one season with neither of them making the Big 12 championship. Are you going to send them on their way and be like, you know what, you weren't even making the Big 12 championship game anyway? Or are they going to kind of have the last laugh of, yeah, Oklahoma, Texas was the last Big 12 championship game, and then we sailed off into the sunset, went to the SEC? I'm just fascinated about how that's going to play out.
I have two distinct, separate opinions about both of those two teams. For Texas, it's horns down. I mean, I hope everybody beats them, and I hope everybody beats them by 20. But Texas has a good team. I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, I think Texas could be in the Big 12 championship in 2023, unfortunately. Yeah. And I think West Virginia has a chance to beat them at home, but I'm not very confident. As far as Oklahoma goes, and this is going to sound pathetic. It really is. I'm warning y'all. This is going to sound pathetic. We got our win. We finally broke the streak. I thought they were going to head off to the SEC, and West Virginia never had beaten them since joining the Big 12. We got our win last year, so I'm just like, go do your thing, Oklahoma. Good. If we win, great. That's awesome. It would be awesome if we could end on a streak, 3 in a row or whatever. That'd be awesome. But we got our win, and now I can kind of relax about the whole Oklahoma monkey on our back. So two very different opinions about those two teams.
I am actually 100% on the same page with you about that. I don't ever lose sleep about Oklahoma being great. It was fun that they were losing this year. Yeah, I mean, it was fun that they were losing this year, and it was amazing for us to get off the schneid as well. Our first win since 2014. That was awesome, and I had a blast at that game. Texas, though, that's the team where I'm like, you can go ahead and lose every game except for to Baylor. Like, y'all can beat Baylor every year. That's fine. Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think Texas is going to be a lot better next year. Of course, people say that literally every year. So we'll see. But I do think another year under Steve Sarkisian and his "Don't Touch Me" self and Quinn Ewers and that whole bunch, I do think that they could actually break through. But, it's been really fun the last 2 years not having Texas or OU in the Big 12 championship and be like, guess what? We don't need you,
Let me ask both of y'all this. So last year, I predicted Kansas State to be a dark horse Big 12 championship contender. That's what happened. This year, I have picked out another team, and I'm actually very confident. Is there anybody – I know it's really, really early, and things will change, and I'll probably even change my opinion. But as of right now, coming off of 2022, looking into 2023, is there one team that you're looking at that you're like, people might not see them coming, but I think they could possibly make a run and be a dark horse to make the Big 12 championship?
People need to look out for Texas Tech. People need to look out for Texas Tech, 100%. And, a lot of TCU fans that's going to cause them tremendous pain. I'm not one who vehemently hates Tech as much as some TCU fans do. But, yeah, they're building something special over there, and they had a lot of potential last year. So, yeah, I do think they could be your Kansas State-type dark horse going into next season.
100. That's my team, man. You read my mind. I have Texas Tech as my dark horse. I think it's going to be Texas Tech versus Texas in the Big 12 championship. Of course, there's going to be competition. I think Baylor's going to be much better. I really do. TCU, depending on, if they can recover from all those losses on the offense, they're still going to be a decent team. But to me, it comes down to Texas and Texas Tech. I don't think Oklahoma is going to be there yet. They're going to be better, maybe an 8-4, 9-3 type of team. But, yeah, I have Texas Tech too. But having said that, the schedule will be important about that. Texas Tech could get screwed, and they have road games against, Texas, BYU, Oklahoma, UCF, the toughest road slate ever, and they pick up more losses than they really should. So I'll be interested to see what type of schedule Texas Tech gets. But, yeah, I think they're going to be a really, really sneaky good team that a lot of people aren't going to see coming.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right about that, too. Because I feel like Tech, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State are all cut from a similar cloth in that those teams at home versus on the road is two totally different animals. And it doesn't matter what season, how good they are. I never look forward to going to Morgantown. I never look forward to going to Lubbock or Stillwater. Like, those teams are always tough outs at home. So, yes, if they get a favorable schedule and they get some of those tougher games at home, I mean, you better watch out. They could really make some noise.
And who's the cliff jumper? Who's going to drop?
Well, I mean, compared to undefeated regular season national championship, it's us. I mean,
okay.
we'll still be bowl eligible.
Anybody else?
Let me see. Well, I don't want to include any of the teams that are coming in.
Right.
It's hard to.
That's fair.
Yeah. Oklahoma State, actually.
Dang, dude.
Oklahoma State.
We're on the same wavelength, man.
They've lost so much, and I think that Gundy's message is starting to go a little sour. I don't think that he's. It's kind of a similar thing to Coach P after being at TCU for so long. I don't think kids are responding. Obviously, why else would you have all of your top players transfer out after a year where it was literally just injuries that kept them out of the top echelon of the conference?
Yep.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm not feeling super high on them.
Virginia at home to end the season. That's going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. A lot of transfers headed out. We saw two different Oklahoma State teams last year. They started off really, really hot, and they the second half of the season was a train wreck. But a lot of that was injuries. So just too many see, Oklahoma State is not Alabama, Georgia, or any of these others that are super, super deep. They're losing a lot of starters. And they don't have those big-time recruits backing them up, 4 and 5 stars. Now, they do have some, but nothing like the Blue Bloods. So I think Oklahoma State has the potential to not only miss a bowl, but miss a bowl badly, depending on their schedule.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. It's wild, man. We're agreeing on literally everything.
Yeah, I got to think of something that we're going to disagree on. Give me a minute.
Moonshine.
This
not a very good alcohol.
I'm not confident on this, and it's not just because you're a TCU fan. I've actually been thinking about this for the past couple of weeks since the national championship. I think there's a small chance that TCU could barely miss a bowl. That also depends on their schedule, and it also depends on how big of a step back the offense takes. Because if you look at that team this year, the defense was not good. They were opportunistic, yes, but overall they were not an elite defense. So it'll be interesting to see how big of a step back that offense takes, and of course, scheduling. Do they get screwed? Is it favorable? If you guys get a very, very tough schedule, it's very, very possible that you guys go from an undefeated regular season, getting to the national championship, to finishing 5 and 7, barely missing a bowl. Not a huge chance, but I think the possibility is there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot hinges on Chandler Morris. I don't think the defense is going to take a super big step back. We're retaining a lot of those guys. And yeah, maybe it wasn't an elite defense insofar as like limiting points, but they didn't break a lot. Right. And they got stops when they needed to. And like you said, they were opportunistic. A lot hinges on Chandler Morris and the offensive line and how we're going to replace a lot of key talent that we're missing. I'm going to tell you, man, I am worried about that Colorado game to start the season. I am very worried about that.
I was just going to say, suddenly that's a sexy game that's going to get a lot of attention. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully for TCU fans, we have it at home. But, oh, man, just that feels like that has upset written all over it. All over it.
Actually, earlier you said you didn't think that the defense will take a step back. I think it's the opposite. I think the defense actually takes a step forward, and it's the offense that will take a step back. And my biggest question is just how big of a step back do they take? That's going to be the biggest issue for TCU.
Yeah. This is somebody said this on Twitter, and I was like, oh my God, this is the truest thing I've ever read in my life. That Colorado is going to beat TCU in week 1, get launched into the top 15, and then lose to Nebraska the next week. Nebraska is going to get launched in the top 15, and both will finish at 500.
That's well, I was agreeing that for a second, but then I remembered they're not SEC teams, so no, I don't think that will happen because they only do that for SEC teams. Have you noticed that?
No.
A 2 and 3
Texas,
team can be a ranked team in the SEC, and oh man, they belong in the top 25, and then they lose the next week, and it just makes the AP poll and the playoff people that vote on these rankings look stupid. They need to stop doing that.
Yeah. I mean, and who knows? We might not even be ranked going into next year. So, if that's the case, then they probably wouldn't be in the top 25. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We got a whole several months, the long drought to wait for it and think about it.
I hope it goes by fast.
Clint, we appreciate you stopping by, man. Everybody get on over to Clint's channel. You basically just look up Clint Foster right on YouTube, and you're going to find you, right? That's what I do.
You should.
It's right there. Absolutely. So again, Clint Foster, really some tremendous, really funny, good stuff, creative stuff on TCU and the Big 12. Some skits there that he does. Just a good time, no doubt about it. Clint, we appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Good seeing you too.
I need to collab with you, man.
All right. We've got a couple Big 12ers stopping by. We got Paul Catalina, who's stopping by. Paul, we appreciate you being here, sir.
Oh, anytime, guys. Anytime. Happy
Absolutely.
to do it.
You can catch Paul's work, of course, on 365 Sports right here on YouTube. And David Smoke stopping by. We believe David's in the car. David, how you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm this is dangerous, but I love it. This is what we do, right?
No.
Yeah,
Don't tell us that. We want to make sure you're safe
I'm good.
there, Smokey.
Hold on, let me wipe. This is so professional. Hold on just a second. Let me yeah, it's gonna be a little bit dark because I'm in the car on my way across town, but great to be here.
Expect the unexpected.
Well, let's tee it up this way for you first, Smokey, and then we'll go to Paul. Just in regards to, this is us just cutting up the Big 12, slicing it up just for a few hours here. So this is just nothing but deep dive on the Big 12. And we saw the conference play pretty well in the regular season, non-conference. In September, the conference went out there and played pretty well, acquitted itself pretty well. Come bowl play, 2 wins. Ole Miss, that Texas Bowl win against Ole Miss by Texas Tech was mighty impressive. And, of course, the college football semifinal win against Michigan. But otherwise, a downer for the Big 12 during postseason play. David, how much do you take from what we saw during the postseason, and how good do you think this conference is?
Well, we had somebody play for the first time ever in the national championship game since the start of the college football playoffs. So that's worth like maybe more than just one win against Michigan. It's worth maybe a couple of different notches. Obviously, the bowl game record. I remember, and to set this up, I remember when Texas beat Georgia, like in 2019, in the Sugar Bowl, and all you heard was that Georgia was disappointed because they weren't playing in the playoffs, and that they no-showed. And I think that's crap. And I'm not saying that some teams aren't more, that word I use or phrase, full throttle than others, or maybe more geek. The bowl games mean more. You're playing. You're in a uniform. You're on scholarship. And I hated that excuse by Georgia, even though anytime Texas wins, okay. But the thing that is so weird now is the opt-outs and those who are already, either being tampered with or are themselves flirting with other particular programs, even while they might be practicing, if they haven't opted out, for a bowl game. It's weird. And that's why the expansion of the college football playoff might prevent that at least for another 10 teams, not just 4, but maybe 12. So I'm not one of those that when the conference I cover is 8-1, man, they're good, or if they're 2-6, it doesn't matter. I just really don't know how to measure bowl games. I don't. It was a great win for Air Force, and they were better, and good for them. Baylor's a mess, and they'd been a mess for a month. So I don't know how to do that. I don't know if it really measures a conference. And by the way, if the SEC had gone 4-8, I'm not saying that they're a bad conference, because that can happen too.
Yeah, that's a great point right there, because that reminded me last year whenever the SEC had a terrible bowl record, all the SEC fans were saying that those bowls didn't matter. It was, we had 2 teams in the national championship, and that's all that matters. And then this year they do way better, and they go back to, look how good we did in bowls. So with the SEC, it's
Right.
just flavor of the week type of thing. But with the Big 12, they definitely last year. Nobody talked about the Big 12 having a great bowl record, but this year apparently we're the worst conference ever because of our bowl record. So that really tells you, the type of treatment that the SEC gets versus what the Big 12 gets.
Where do you stand on this, Paul?
Oh, don't I know it? Look, go back to my Twitter feed 8 days ago after the national championship game, and I just posited the point that, look, everybody's going to say that the SEC is so far ahead of the Big 12 because TCU lost so badly. Well, I don't think that's fair to the rest of the Big 12, and it's certainly not fair to Georgia and Alabama to say that just based on recent history. Georgia and Alabama are really far ahead of everybody. Everybody else in the SEC is pretty much about the same, although what the SEC does better than people is when they have those opportunities, the big moments, they finish. That's what the other conferences aren't doing repeatedly. They're not finishing. But the SEC is also kind of riding in this circle of, well, Florida won in 2008 and Auburn won in 2010. And even I've seen people say, well, Tennessee won in 1998. Well, how's that working for all those people today in 2023? This, like, when they wake up in the morning and they call a recruit, does Tennessee tell them, oh, hey, we beat Alabama this year, right? They didn't say we beat FSU in 1998. T. Martin was the quarterback. You guys heard of Peerless Price? Like, he had a great game that day. They don't say that. You know, Florida may say, like, you can come see the Tim Tebow statue for sure, but there's certainly nothing in the last 15 years has benefited them from that. Like, you know, it's about now. And the cycle turns a lot faster now for everybody who's not like the tippy top. So to take away, like, and say that the SEC is so far ahead of everybody else is disrespectful to Georgia for what they're doing right now. It's disrespectful for Nick Saban for what he's done for a decade. And it's probably disrespectful on a certain extent to LSU, who has found a way through all that time, you know, in that since Tennessee won in 98 till now, to have wins in all those different eras. So it's not like they have that and they'll point to, well, Florida beat Utah by a score at their own place in the first game of the season. So it wasn't like it was a blowout. It was a evenly matched game, and Florida won at home. You know, we'll see what happens this year when Florida goes to Utah and plays there. I would assume that maybe that the script would be flipped because it's a home game and it probably still is close. They point to the bowl games. You cannot, like, in the modern era, why would it be fair to point to a bowl game? What was Wisconsin and Oklahoma State? Wisconsin's got Luke Fickell on his first day. Jim Leonard standing there. They've got two head coaches. Oklahoma State had 500 opt-outs and transfer portal guys. They're playing with a roster that they didn't play with all year. So how's that indicative of how good Oklahoma State was throughout the whole year? Now, look, we know what happened to their team, but even still, to say that, like, oh, the bowl record's bad because a depleted Wisconsin team beat a depleted Oklahoma State team by 3 points. Come on. Like, is the SEC so much better than the Big 12? Arkansas played Kansas. It took, 4 overtimes. It's not like if you win by a score, it doesn't mean the conference is way ahead. It just means that you had the last possession. Like, that's what it meant. So I think those metrics are not fair to go on.
You know, another thing that gets on my nerves that people don't talk about whenever they're talking about, oh, the Big 12's way behind on the SEC. Well, there's something that people don't realize about the SEC. Brand protection during the regular season. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about scheduling. Their conference scheduling is 4 home games and 4 away games. And in their out-of-conference game, they rarely, now every once in a while they do, but they rarely schedule any true road games for Power 5 opponents out of conference. Now, last year, Alabama went on the road to Texas, and this year, Florida will go on the road to Utah, but that's few and far between. Usually, it's a neutral site game like we saw between Georgia and Oregon. You flip over to the Big 12, you have 9 conference games, and they schedule a crap ton of road Power 5s. West Virginia, my team, we scheduled a road trip to Penn and a road trip to Virginia Tech. I'm not complaining. I love playing our rivals. But people don't talk about that, and I'm not bashing the SEC for that. I think that's really, really smart, but you have to factor into that. I think the Big 12 tends to beat up on each other because of scheduling like that, and it's really smart that the SEC does that because they really are protecting their brands. Because the fewer road games that these guys have to go on, the less chance they have to trip up and fall. I mean, even last year, Alabama. I know Alabama beat Texas by 1, but isn't it strange that's the year that they picked up 2 road losses, LSU, Tennessee, and missed the playoffs? I'm telling you, they are trying to protect their brands over there and limit as many pitfalls as possible.
Well, one thing that is true, though, is what Paul said allows them to do that because Alabama smoke Kansas State in a game that's the Sugar Bowl, like Baylor had beaten Ole Miss last year, or Georgia hammered TCU. And yeah, they were fortunate to get through Ohio State. They can do that because one of the things that is very much in play is the SEC, and Paul, you and I, we've talked about this forever, is that the way that the top 25 is set up at the start of the year is a bubble. There's certain teams that just bounce around. And an unranked team, let's just say Missouri, was to beat Florida, who's ranked 15th. Missouri moves into 22, Florida drops to 20. And then Florida might lose the next week, but they had beaten it. It's part of, and it's not a conspiracy. It's really just been going on a long time. The SEC has a great media campaign. The Big 12 with your Mark needs to have that. And people like us who are involved in this show, that doesn't mean we like suck a tailpipe or anything like that. We tell the truth. And I think that what we do, and I think what's happening is with more and more podcasts and more shows and more teams that are coming into the Big 12, I think that everyone's starting to kind of get it. You know, like in the Big 12 in men's basketball, that is what the SEC says they are in football, right? They're, loaded. And now, does that mean that the Big 12 is the best conference? Well, we'll see at the end of the year, but they pretty much prove it day in and day out, and they win big games, not just Kansas or not Baylor recently, but everyone. I mean, they kind of have become, in basketball, the SEC. We don't complain about that because they back it up in the big games. So, Kansas winning, Baylor won it, Texas Tech played for it. So, but the road game, the stat about Alabama not playing a true non-conference road game in God knows how many years it was, blew my mind. They're really good about playing in Arlington against Wisconsin or Atlanta against, let's just say, anybody. USC. They're really good about, you're right, that's a great point about the neutral or almost always home games when it comes to non-conference games.
You want a stat that's going to blow you away if you, and like GBD was pointing out, Alabama goes to Texas, just played that game last season, but it was way back to Penn State, I think in 2010 or 11 before they had played. Florida, the Florida Gators. So this trip to Utah is historic because they have not left the state of Florida for a non-conference game since 1991.
That's unbelievable. Well, that's unbelievable. I was living in Florida in 1991, so it's not that unbelievable. Like you think about what they do, but to be able to skate through and get by, and then in that time win 3 national titles, like without having to do that, like not falling into a situation where you're scheduling all the way out in Florida. 8 years down the line, scheduled a home and home with Notre Dame or USC or somebody like that. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Well, but they also, correct me if I'm wrong, Florida State and Miami are out of conference games, right?
Yes.
So, and they don't play them every year because they eventually started trying to dodge Miami.
Well,
but when you play,
Mark,
but when you play,
Steve, if you want me to.
When you play Florida State, and Miami in non-conference, you have, that's pretty damn good, guys. And I don't care how much either one of them has been in the abyss for the last 15 years, and Florida State's coming out of it and really a top 10 team right now. But when you play Florida and Miami, or Miami and Florida State as two as your non-conference, and I'm not defending the SEC, but you play those two as your two non-conference games, you're allowed to pretty much play whoever you want at home, in my opinion.
Yeah, but they also, and it's great, but brilliantly, their best rival outside the state of Florida is Georgia, and they play that game in Florida,
in Jacksonville. Yeah, yeah.
So
there you go.
That's pretty. Look, it's almost like you saying that, like, and you've had all that since 2008, and now their fans should be even madder that they're not winning, and the fact that like, they only get on a plane to play games in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, in the point about Alabama's 2 losses were road games at LSU and Tennessee. Now, I'll bet, but the fact that both of them were on the last play of the game, I would think, I would think that no matter as good as Nick Saban and Alabama have been since 2008 or 9 when they won their first national title, why should they care whether they're on the road against anybody? They're probably going to win. And there's nothing wrong with being tested like they were against what was an above average Texas, not a great team, not a good team, but an average to above average Texas team. That right there, yeah, it's just hard. It's no difference than road games in the conference. You might have somebody like right now in basketball, and I know I think we're live, right? But right now, I just happened to glance that West Virginia was beating the living tar out of TCU a minute ago in men's basketball. It's hard. Conference games are hard. Conference games in a road are hard. And so, yeah, the Alabama would go that long without wanting to be tested other than in a bowl game maybe, like a road game, and that's even a neutral site. That's hard to imagine. At least they were playing Penn State. At least they do play somebody who's kind of a blue blood alpha dog most every year in a non-conference, whether it's neutral or at home. And everybody in the Big 12 has been ramping up. They're like Baylor. They were the worst when it came to non-conference games. Talk about playing nobody. They didn't play anybody. And at least now they're starting to play Oregon, Utah, Auburn, Brigham Young. They're getting into that mode where they're playing those teams, thank God, because everybody should.
Yeah, they not only at the beginning of the Bryles era, they not only would not schedule those games. When you'd ask about it, they'd be like, "What are we? We're not doing that. There's no way. There's no way. No. It was not the organizational philosophy."
Right. And to be fair, and back when he took over 2008, they were horrible. They had been horrible for nearly 2 decades. And I remember one time Ian McCall basically all but telling me, we just got to get 6 wins, which, that was always like, are they? And they finally did in 2010, and then they started running the table until it all fell apart. But those 3 non-conference games for them, they needed to be at least close to gimmies. Unfortunately, one year was TCU, and they beat the hell out of Baylor. They needed those 2 or 3 non-conference games just to get to 6 wins. And, of course, eventually they didn't need those. And their schedule, again, their non-conference schedule has been awful up until really recently, the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, my other back pocket fact to tag along with the Florida one was that Baylor had not played and still hasn't played a ranked opponent non-conference since 1997.
Oh,
yeah, that's not shocking either. That's not shocking. And
no.
a couple times it looked like down the line, like maybe that would happen. Like they scheduled Duke when they had Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones was hurt and didn't play in that game. So Duke would have been 23rd at best had they done that. And Duke came in here and whooped them without him. But like Duke was that. Like they just, they had Liberty beat them before they were beating everybody else. Matt Rule's first year.
Yep.
But Liberty wasn't ranked at the time. They just were kind of an upstart. So,
but
guys,
Baylor, again,
I was just going to say, just give me 1 second to play traffic cop here. GBD, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Golden Blue Dude, everybody catch his YouTube channel breaking down West Virginia and college football across the map. GBD, you're always welcome. We appreciate you being here.
It was fun talking to everybody. Good to meet everybody and talk to everybody. By the way, on the way out, I got a question for everybody. With the Big 12, after Oklahoma and Texas leave and they're at 12 teams, do you think that the Big 12 goes to scheduling kind of like the SEC and they go to 8 conference games and 4 out-of-conference games? That was my out of the building question that I'm going to ask.
No.
They
got it.
They better not. They do not need. They don't, because none of those teams, if they gave up another conference game, they're not going to replace it with Alabama. No one, even those who have played pretty good non-conference schedules. No, they don't need to do that. If they do that, I would be furious because they need to play. They need to even add another game. Play 10 conference games, do something, but you cannot go backwards on the number of conference games. And the SEC is actually truly about time contemplating if they should not add another conference game. Whether they do or not remains to be seen.
Exactly right. All right, appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, DBD.
All right, you too.
Yeah. These conferences are becoming too large, and if you're not adding conference games, then you don't see half the conference every year, and it's just ridiculous and
Yeah.
illegitimizes the championship. We got Steve Helwig joining us from Underdog Dynasty and Hustle Belt. He'll give us the angle on the 4 newbies coming into the conference in particular. Steve, we appreciate you being here. Before we get to you, Steve, on your take on the BYU, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati entries, for you two, are you looking forward to, as much as I am, the awkwardness and also the matchups of the OU Texas holdovers sticking around for a season or two, having to play UCF, BYU, Houston? I didn't want a clean break. I didn't want OU and Texas leaving at the same time that the other 4 came in. I wanted to see the awkwardness of throwing them all together and seeing them play and seeing some interesting matchups.
Oh, I hope that there's a restaurant.
I think a lot of people want.
Yeah. I just hope there's a restaurant that can like that flavor, and I can eat it all the time, because I do want to see Texas in Houston at Houston Stadium. I want to see Oklahoma have to go to Orlando, and then maybe even the next week have to go to Provo back to back. I want to see those things because, look, they created this situation, and I hope that there is at least a little bit of pettiness in the scheduling on the way out. Not to make it unfair, just to make it to where it's like, look, you guys gave us this headache, and our only Tylenol is sending you to the places you don't want to go.
But you're right, Paul, but the history shows that even if there's a reason and validation to be able to stick it, where, that somehow or another they'll get nervous or whatever. Mac Rhodes told both Craig and Paul yesterday, I was not on the show yesterday, but I remember one of the comments is if the computer algorithm spits out somebody being in Orlando one week, they won't be in Provo the next week. Although if that happens, it needs to be Texas or Oklahoma. That's for sure.
What do you think, Steve?
Well, I mean, it's still going to be Texas and Oklahoma because they play that neutral site game every year in Dallas. There's going to be 4 home games and 4 road games for Texas and Oklahoma each. So I'm curious to see how the schedule spits it out. I can tell you already, I've heard reports Texas will come down to Houston next year. I think it will be in October. So far, I know a few things about Houston's schedule. I know Joseph Duarte, another Houston beat writer of the Houston Chronicles, reported on them of TCU will come down to Houston on week 3, September 16th. And also Texas is going to come down to Houston probably sometime in October. Those are the only things I know about the Big 12 schedule at this time. But yeah, this transition stage is going to be interesting. I know the fan bases of Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, they're looking forward to hosting some of these teams like these Texases and Oklahomas in their stadiums before they go on their way out. So I think that's something that those fan bases are going to look forward to. Those are going to be some big games for them too that they'll get to host. I know some people were talking about Houston wanting to schedule its game against Texas at NRG. I can tell you right now, that is not happening. They are not going to give Texas a neutral site game. They're going to make Texas come down to TD-ECU Stadium and play in front of Houston's home stadium there when Texas does come this season.
Texas would want them to do that. That turns it like that right now. If they have it at their home stadium, Texas will have an allotment of 8,000 tickets or whatever it is. However many they sell. I think it's between 4,000 and 8,000 depending on the size of the stadium. But like you have that allotment. So right now they can control the allotment before it gets to the secondary market. And for a game like that, Houston fans will show up and go so that to keep the Texas fans out. If you move it across the street, right, then, it's not really across the street, but you move it to NRG Stadium, then you have taken away your home field advantage and you're opening up the city of Houston. People who say that, I don't know if they've ever been to Houston, because they don't understand the breadth of that city. It's gigantic. And what are there more of in Houston? What are there more of in Houston than Cougars? Longhorns. So you just open up the floodgates for that to be a burnt orange home game. It would be the foolishness.
They can't
for them to do that.
Yeah, I don't think they can do that, and I think that that would, again, you're supposed to be welcoming these 4 schools thank God they're coming in. It all worked out. It came in like it almost went seamlessly after the Texas and OU story. Remember all the unknown, and that's how we all got to know each other with the comings and goings and the rumors and speculation. Yeah, if they go to NRG, there'll be 65,000 people, and 58,000 of them will be Texas fans. That's good, and rightfully so. Hell, if they played Houston and Baylor down in Houston, Baylor fans, even though they don't always travel great, they're known as kind of, hot and cold. They're known, like in Houston, to have a huge alumni base. That game has to be on the campus. At Houston, it will be. I can't wait for them to go to Orlando if they do, depending on how many years they're left. I think just the one. Nippert, that'd be an interesting thing. They've been to Provo. Don't send them to Provo. They've been to, although that's a hell of a place to play. They've been to Provo and got beat by Taysom Hill. Let them go to Nippert. Let them go to Orlando. Let them go to Houston.
Yeah,
So
Houston had that game against Oklahoma in 2016 at NRG Stadium. I'd say Houston actually probably outnumbered Oklahoma fans in that game. It did feel like a home field advantage for the Cougars, and they beat Oklahoma with that kick six in that game to start that 2016 season with Tom Herman.
Well, they did, but that was a team that was loaded. You remember that was a team. I'm not sure if Greg Ward was on that team. That might have been a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah.
But they were pretty good. There were thoughts that after they beat Oklahoma, remember, there were thoughts, are they going to interrupt the party as a non-Power 5 school? And then, of course, that fell apart. And then the Herman thing fell apart as well. No, Houston fans can get there. It's just that traditionally, there are a lot of schools in the Big 12. Baylor's at times. There are issues. TCU had the once-in-a-lifetime team or close to it other than back in the 30s and 40s. And then Houston, it's a little iffy when it comes to the fan bases. That's the one thing that UCF is going to bring to the table, Cincinnati's going to bring to the table, and Brigham Young's going to bring to the table, that those places really do light up their stadiums. And that might be unfair to the ones I mentioned, but we've been to Amon Carter. We've been to Baylor. I mean, a bunch. We've seen some of these schools that are sporadic, I think is probably the word to use when it comes to sometimes the conflicts when it comes to filling up their stadiums.
So let me throw this one out there, because you got 4 just intriguing programs hitting the conference here, and they all have their different strengths. Houston's basically an NFL breeding ground, Orlando to a certain extent as well, and they got Disney for NIL, and they got all sorts of opportunities. So you can point to each one. Of course, Cincinnati's been the best of the 4 recently, but their coach has left, and BYU's going to trot out a bunch of 28-year-olds. So who is the biggest threat to become elite within this conference out of those 4? Because I think you can make an argument for all 4.
I think that the leader in, before it all if this was a political race, if this was the primaries, the candidate leading in Iowa might be UCF because of that fertile recruiting ground, of the ability to now say we're in Florida and we're playing games in Texas, right? So they have that opportunity. Now, part of that is galvanizing the fan base and capitalizing on all that at the same time. Can Gus Malzahn do that? That's the question. And then I would say Houston after that, just because they are in Houston and now they have Big 12 backing. But the best run athletic department out of all 4 has been Cincinnati lately. So again, they could jump out in front, but I would say UCF has the most potential because of the fact that they can now recruit up against the Big 3 in Florida and say, yes, we're a Power 5 school as well. So you can come here and you don't have to, take a step down to come and play in Orlando.
I think that, the UCF thing is intriguing. Incredible fan base. The fertile grounds of Florida, which is, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California. You hear about that, Louisiana. But Florida, I mean, they're just dripping with talent everywhere you go around that peninsula. Brigham Young's been there. They really are. I referred to them the other day as a Power 5 school, and Paul and Craig had to remind me they're not. Yeah, they are. They really are. I mean, I know the conference they've been a part of. Brigham Young's been playing pretty much big boy football for a long, long time. So this won't, that they had a down year, but so did Baylor. So, but I mean, they're already kind of set for that situation. Houston still kind of befuddles me on that. I don't know. I don't know. And I hate it for Cincinnati that Luke Fickell's leaving. I hate it for the Big 12 that Luke Fickell's leaving. That doesn't mean they won't be good. But, man, I was looking forward to Cincinnati with Luke Fickell for at least a little bit, but that's gone. That's kind of a little bit of a hit. UCF, big school, huge fan base, crazy fan base, locked in fan base. And they're in the state of Florida. And I don't know how many players from Texas are on their roster, but like this week alone in East Texas, where I lived for 30 years, and football there is great. Football, even where we are in Central Texas, is great. We know Houston and Dallas, etc. This week alone in Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, teams like that, LSU, all of them were in East Texas, where there's a lot of smaller schools, but a lot of great speed. All of those schools.
We'll see if we get Smokey back here. In the meantime, Steve, your thoughts about who might jump out as being, and again, you could select any of the four, but what are your thoughts about who might be the best candidate to raise a banner first in the Big 12?
To raise a banner first, I don't know how long we're talking, whether it's going to be 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. I mean, we saw TCU come into the Big 12 in 2012, and they already had a co-championship in 2014. So we've seen teams make the transition pretty smoothly in the Big 12's last round of expansion. Out of the current candidates, I'm actually very low on Cincinnati right now after Cincinnati had some phenomenal years with Fickell. That's just because this program, they've lost ADs, they've lost Luke Fickell, coaching staff recently. And I already was a little shaken about the way that the roster had been developing this past season. And they've taken huge hits in the transfer portal. Many guys have already gone to Wisconsin. Of course, they're getting some Louisville guys in return. But I don't know if Cincinnati has that next quarterback, a Desmond Ridder, to guide the program through this. I don't know if they have all that NFL caliber talent that they had on defense in the 2021 playoff team when they had 6 defenders drafted, 9 overall players drafted, which was 3rd among all colleges. So I'm not sure if Cincinnati's there right now. I'm going to have to watch how the 2023 season plays out before I am higher on the Bearcats. UCF is one that intrigues me the most, I think. I think you can make an argument that the UCF Knights, they underachieved last year by only going 9-5. That team had a lot of talent. They lost some questionable games to Navy and Louisville, where it really felt like they should have won those games. Yeah, they've been banged up a little bit over the past few years, but this is a team that Gus Malzahn has recruited super well with, and he has a lot of SEC transfers that he gets every single year. You look at UCF's offense last year. Their quarterback, John Rice Plumlee, was an SEC transfer. Their receivers, Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson, SEC transfers. Tight end Kamora Gamble, SEC transfer. Just you look across the roster, and he has nailed this transfer portal. And I think as long as Gus Malzahn's at the helm, I think he'll continue to recruit and gain transfers pretty well. Yeah, UCF has had a rough outgoing class this offseason, but I think they've got a good haul in return. They've got some 4-star recruits coming in. So and with UCF being the one Big 12 team in Florida, I think that could help get a lot of that talent in that state to stay home. I know they've already beat out Florida and Miami and some of their competitors for some of these recruits, like the 4-stars I mentioned earlier. So right now, I do think that UCF probably is the one that's most likely to hoist a conference championship. But I do think that a lot of people do sleep on BYU. BYU, I mean, this is a team that they're used to kind of going through a gauntlet of something that's similar to a Big 12 schedule. You look how they start their seasons. Some of the past few seasons, they've gone through 4 or 5 Big 12 caliber teams in a row to start the year. We saw them beat Baylor in that double overtime game earlier this year, play a few Pac-12 teams. So I do think that BYU could also be in the running there. Houston, Dana Holgerson's been pretty blunt and honest about this. He has said that Houston's not ready for Big 12 from a facilities perspective yet, and he also thinks that the recruiting needs to get there. And I think that's very clear on the defensive side as they transition into this new era of the Big 12, that Houston doesn't have a Big 12 caliber defense yet. They're going to need to work on that. And offensively, you're going to have to replace Clayton Tune and Tank Dell. So I think it's going to be a few years before Houston can get back up to that point where it was. But overall, I do think that BYU and UCF are in the best shape immediately. So I would say those two are the two most likely to hoist a banner first.
It's funny that Dana Hogerson would take a knock on his own recruiting, especially since he's not really known for that being a strong suit of his. But Paul, what TCU did this past season, is that sustainable? Maybe not to that degree, like we're expecting them to go to championship games all the time, but does this kind of breakout season give them the opportunity to do things that weren't foreseeable before?
I don't know. Like, Baylor had their best season last year they've ever had in the history of the school and didn't follow up on it, failed spectacularly this year. But I don't know. Like, TCU has done really well in the portal, at least, as much as you think you can do well in the portal when you're picking up people who've left other places. They've done well on that aspect of it. They're going to have to replace a couple of generational talents for them, and Quentin Johnston and guys like that. But I think they can sustain and be good. I think Sonny Dykes is a very smart and good coach. There's some controversy about the Kendall Briles hire, and we'll see how that works out for him. But the good news about that is Sonny Dykes already knows offense. So if KB doesn't work out, then they can move on to somebody else. But I think it's sustainable. I don't know if they can catch lightning in a bottle like they did and win all those close games again. But I do think that they can sustain being really good for a good long while. Look, people forget this, but had not for the scandal at Baylor probably could have sustained for a pretty good while being elite with the kind of system they were running. Would they have won national titles? I've always been of the belief that until that group started caring about special teams and penalties, they would have always lost to teams like Alabama or Clemson and coaches that do care about those things. But yeah, they could have done it. So if TCU avoids the mistakes of the teams not named Texas and Oklahoma of Big 12 past, then yeah, I think they can sustain it. It's just hard to do that because now everybody's going to have the bullseye on you, and you're no longer sneaking up on people like they did this year. Up until maybe the last couple of weeks, people thought like, well, it's all going to come crashing down for TCU eventually. They'll lose 2 or 3 games down the stretch. Like, you can't keep this going. And then they just continue to prove people wrong at every turn until they ran up against the freaking Avengers in Georgia. So
before I give you guys your parting shots on whatever you want to mention near the end here, who's got the trajectory headed straight up outside of TCU, since we've talked about them, and outside of the 4 new schools coming in? Is there anybody that you really believe? Of course, Dave Aranda is considered one of the best minds in college football at Baylor. Joey McGuire did some really nice things, and they splashed against Lane Kiffin in the Texas Bowl. It's, who do you like? Matt Campbell, maybe some of the shines come off of him in the last few years since he hasn't been able to get past 8-4.
That's a tough question. I'm looking forward to Steve's answer here because he might be able to be a little more eloquent about it than I can. But I do think that Baylor, it would be hard to say that Baylor's got the arrow pointed up. I think it's like leaning up, right? I mean, I trust Dave Aranda, but this year, made me question a lot of things. It's got to be consistent. He's got to not have a bad year and a good year and a bad year and a good year. He's got to string them all good year together. Oklahoma State's a mess right now. Iowa State, it's hard to know. West Virginia is probably going to have a new coach after next year. The one I would feel the best about is Texas Tech. But again, that's always been a place that's kind of good. They have a good year, they'll have like an average year and above average year like they did this year where they kind of close well. Maybe that turns into a good year, and then they lose the key pieces of that, and then it takes them a couple years to get back. And it's enthusiastic and powerful and all that stuff as Joey McGuire has made some really interesting coaching hires out there, especially with Zach Hitley. He is the coach, in my belief, that has one of the few places that you really have to deal with, because most college towns are about the same. You know, they're not like, if it was about the city, then everybody would go to UCF and Miami and San Diego State and UNLV and places like that. It's not always about the city. It's about the coach bringing the people to that city, right? But Lubbock does have the problem in that it is 6 or 7 hours away from anywhere cool. So if you were going to go play any sport in Lubbock, Texas, you were committing to being in Lubbock, Texas for at least 350 days of your life, and before you transfer. And that's tough. You know, if you go to school in, you know, Norman, you can be in Dallas in 3 hours. You can be in Oklahoma City in 30 minutes. You know, you can be in Dallas in less than 3 hours, right? So you can be in a big city. You can go do something. You can go to a concert. Like, there's life there. But if you're in Lubbock and you want to go to a concert in Dallas, you know, if Garth Brooks is playing in Dallas, you have to rearrange your life to go get there. So it's tough to get people out there sustainably. So you've got to be like the successful coaches out there, Spike Dykes and Mike Leach, have always been creative about the way that they ran the program. But even still, you cannot – West Texas is – I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it is, I mean, as close to nothingness as you're ever going to be in. I mean, you just look in every direction and you literally see, like, the only way it could be more nothing if it was just black, or like, you know, like just nothing, you know, into the void. It is nothing, and it's flat, and it is tough to be in West Texas.
I'd say in terms of an upward trajectory, I know they won the Big 12 this season, but they were only 10-4. I think there's still room for Kansas State to grow under Chris Kleiman. I really like Colin Klein as their offensive coordinator. Colin Klein was a great quarterback there, and it felt like every quarterback that Kansas State has had since Colin Klein is an attempt at remaking Colin Klein at quarterback. So Kansas State has a very distinct style that they have on offense. And remember, this past year, they had two quarterbacks throughout the season, Adrian Martinez and Will Howard. Both of them won at a pretty reasonable rate. It seemed like Kansas State was a good plug-and-play system where – and defense, you know that this team's always going to be physical. They're going to execute on special teams. I just really like what Chris Kleiman has done at this Kansas State program and continuing some of the excellence from Bill Snyder's tenure and capturing that elusive Big 12 title this past season. I think that they probably could have even had a better record than 10-4. They left a few wins on the table against Tulane, where they missed their last 4 fourth down attempts, against TCU, where they blew a 28-10 lead. I honestly thought that there was room for this Kansas State team to be even better than they were last year. I think this is a team that could contend for this Big 12 championship next year. Now, in terms of other trajectories, I'm a little concerned what's going on at Oklahoma State right now. Mike Leach has had that program as consistent as any Big 12 program is. I mean, that team's going to go like 9-4, 10-3 almost every year, sometimes compete for a Big 12 championship. They probably should have won it in 2021. They won the Fiesta Bowl instead, which was a great win over Notre Dame. But with all the transfer portal losses, and they're going to have to remake their whole team next year, and I'm not sure how Oklahoma State's going to handle that. So that's an intriguing team I would like to follow to see if they can maintain the trajectory, which has been pretty stable that they've had throughout the past 15 seasons. So those are two teams I definitely have my eye on for the 2023 season.
Paul, we appreciate you stopping by, man. It was great to hear from you. Good to see you. Thank you so much for the insight. Let people know where the best place to find you and your work is.
Right there, you can see it on the screen at Paul Catalina at 365 Sports YT on YouTube. If you're in the Waco area, I'll be doing improv comedy at Bear Arm Brewing this week. I don't know if that's going to help anybody, help that show sell any tickets, but you know, they asked me to promote it wherever I was this week, so I'm going to. Let's see, where else can you find my work? I've got a new podcast launching soon from a kind of a partner network of ours, which will be pretty interesting. Just did the first one the other day. It's called A Walk Through Your Pain. That is going to be, I'm going to talk to my friends. I'm going to talk to some other comedians. I'm going to talk to some, sports figures, people I can get about their most painful experience as a sports fan, loss and all that. And we're going to have fun talking about it as they work through to maybe the joy they've had or the pain they can still continue to have. The first episode's a buddy of mine who's a Ken Griffey Jr. fan, and the story of how he did not get to see Ken Griffey Jr. play baseball is so delicious and awful. Not for him, for me, it's delicious and wonderful, but for him, it's so awful, but it's hilarious. So I'll be doing that soon, and I'll let everybody know how they can get that. You'll see it on my Twitter when it comes up here in a couple weeks.
I will have to check that out because I'm a guy that took his son to 3 of Ken Griffey Jr.'s last games because he loved Ken Griffey Jr. And this was 2010 or 11 was his last season.
Look, I can tell you, I specifically, because of the podcast, know the date. June 2nd, 2010 was the day he announced. Well, that's the day he filed his retirement paperwork. He actually didn't tell the Mariners until June 5th, and the Mariners didn't announce it until that day. And they were supposed to come and play the Rangers on June 8th, and that's when Zach was going.
Okay. Oh, I gotcha. So yeah, I'm jumping the gun a little bit on it being the final days of his career because I had forgotten briefly that until you outlined that Griffey was hitting like $160 and actually limped through about 3 months of the season before he's like, okay, I'm out of here mid-season. We actually went to the final games of the previous season in Cleveland with the Mariners in town and went Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just so I could get my son in the stadium seeing. And Ken Griffey Jr. hit a home run for him. So, hey, he was ecstatic about that. Good stuff. Steve, what do you have going?
At S_Hellwick is my Twitter. Also trying to develop a YouTube if I can ever have time to make videos in between writing and work and all of that. But that would just be Shellwick is my YouTube. I tried to do a bowl recap for the first day of bowl games, and then I got a little overloaded with my writing after that. But for anyone who wants to follow Houston's transition to the Big 12, I'll be covering the Houston Cougars and just any 131. Actually, it's going to be 133 teams next year. Welcome Jacksonville State and Sam Houston. I follow them all, talk about them all. So any college football, I'm all a fan of. And I'm really looking forward to the schedule drop this week.
Absolutely. Yes. Steve is, I don't know how he does it. He's able to follow every team in college football. We lean on him for the group of 5, but he follows everyone. And then if you follow him on Twitter, you see that he's an NBA expert as well. So he's all over the NBA, loves the NBA. And then I caught a video a few weeks ago, Steve, of you throwing down a slam like a 180. That was impressive. That was phenomenal.
Yes, I like to play basketball a lot. Yeah, I worked on 360 dunking and all that. So yeah, I've been able to get some hops up there. So yeah, I enjoy playing basketball when I do have some time away from watching and following sports.
Great stuff. And Steve, kind enough to join us several times during the bowl season, during his bowl journeys of what bowl destinations he hits based on his coverage for. Again, you see it right there on the banner, Underdog Dynasty and Hustle Belt. All right, Steve, we appreciate you being here and providing your insight as always.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, we'll wrap it up here at the Voice of College Football. My name is Mark Rogers, if you are catching us for a first time. And we run here the Voice of College Football main channel, and we've got all sorts of channels. Most of the helmets that you see behind me are represented by team channels. We've got 25 of them, so check them out. We will be posting an interview that we did with athletic director Ren Baker of West Virginia on the West Virginia channel, so look out for that. I also just did a review on the Notre Dame schedule, and I'm going to go through schedule reviews like nothing you've seen. So we're going to go through schedule reviews of all the Power 5 teams, so please be on the lookout for that as well. We've got a Pac-12 chat show coming up. I'm actually going to take a rest, going to take a break. I won't be involved, but we've got our guys, Tim, Tony, Rick, Exploring with Ben, and others on the Pac-12 chat show coming up in just a few minutes right here on the main channel, the USC and the Oregon channels right here at the Voice of College Football. please tell people that we are here. This is the way we thrive and succeed and are able to keep these channels going, is based on word of mouth and your contributions, your support, your help. So get the links out there on social media and just flat out tell people, hey, got to check out the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for your support. Appreciate you being here, and we will catch you soon. And again, it's the Pac-12 Chat Show up next right here at the Voice of College Football.